This is 10-9. We are doing long division. Tonight's homework, 467, 1 through 37 odd. 2017, in case you're watching this during another year. Okay, so doing long division with polynomials is not that far off from doing regular long division. When I divide 6 into 144, first I say, does 6 go into 1? And since it doesn't, we move over to the next digit. Does 6 go into 14? Since it goes into 14 two times, I put the 2 over the 4, and then I multiply 2 by the whole, I multiply 2 by 6, and I get 12. Now, what's the next step in long division? Because this is the one that everybody gets confused on. Yes? We're going to subtract the 12, we're going to subtract the whole darn thing, that whole 12. Not a piece of 12, but the whole 12. And then I get a remainder of 2, and I bring down my 4. All right, so now we say to ourselves, 6 goes into 24 how many times? 4, and I put it over the 4, and then I line it up. Big thing to remember is to line your digits up, and then we subtract the whole darn thing, and I'm left with 0. When you're doing long division with polynomials, the first thing you're going to do is look at the first term in the divisor, that x, and all we're going to do is try and get rid of that x. So x times what equals x squared? X. Now, because I have two terms here, I have to move what I'm multiplying it by to the second term. Because when I multiply right here, I asked you, first thing I said to you is, what are we multiplying? What are we multiplying x by, right? To get x squared, and you said x. But once I start multiplying it by x, look what's going to happen. I'm going to multiply the whole binomial by x. So x times x is what? And I put that under the x squared. And x, so look what I'm doing. Really quickly, I'm saying x times x is what? X squared. And then I place it under the x squared. And then I'm going to say x times 5. Positive 5 is what? 5. Positive 5x, and I put it under the negative 4x. Okay? And now we are going to subtract the whole darn thing, not a piece of it. So just like you subtracted the entire 12, we're going to subtract that entire binomial. So when I distribute that negative into the x squared, it makes it a negative, and it makes this a negative, right? So now these two cancel out, and I'm left with negative 9x. What do you think I do next? Good, minus 45. Now what? X times what equals negative 9x? Negative 9. And so I'm doing negative 9 times x is what? And negative 9 times positive 5 is? Good. But then we have to subtract the whole darn thing. That becomes a positive. That becomes a positive. These are additive inverses. These are additive inverses. And I'm left with 0. So the solution is x minus 9, or the quotient. Questions there? Okay, so which one goes into the box, the division box? Yes?
X cubed minus 6x minus 7x.
Right. The top dog goes in the dog house. So top dog always goes in the dog house. So that x cubed goes in the dog house. Does anybody know the math word for that? What is that, the term called that's all inside the box? And the term outside. Peter?
The dividend is in the box and the divisor is outside.
Right, the divisor is outside the box, and the dividend is inside the box. And on top is when we get a quotient. So, again, I'm going to ask myself, x times what equals x to the third? And because I'm multiplying that x squared by 2 terms, I need to move in and put it over the negative 6x squared. Now, x squared times x is what? X cubed. I line it up. And x squared times negative 4. X squared times negative 4. Negative 4x squared. And it all goes under the like terms. Now, I'm going to subtract the whole darn thing. That means this becomes a negative and this becomes positive. What are we left with? Yes?
Negative 2x squared.
Negative 2x squared. And then I bring down, you can bring down just the next term or everything else. But remember, every time I'm only clearing that first term. I'm trying to clear one term at a time. So x times what equals negative x squared? Negative 2x squared. William?
Negative 2x.
Good. Negative 2x. And so I'm going to place that up top, on top of the next term. Negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared. Right? This is, when I multiply this, it's not just negative 2, it's negative 2x squared. And negative 2 times negative 4 is what? Positive 8x. Good. But I have to subtract the whole darn thing. That's going to make this positive and this negative. That's the biggest one they forget. That you have to subtract. You have to take the opposite of those. So now these two cancel, and here I'm left with negative 15x, and I bring down my last term. What am I multiplying x by to get that negative 15x? Jacob? Negative 15 times x is negative 15x. Negative 15 times negative 4 is positive 60. But we must subtract the whole darn thing. So I am finally left with a 0. So the solution is x squared minus 2x minus 15. Okay, questions? All right. All right, you want to try one on your own? Pause the recording and try the next one on your own. Let's check our work. Shh. All right, 2x goes into 2x cubed, x squared times. We get 2x cubed minus 3x squared. We are left with, when I distribute, we are left with minus 14x squared. Bring down my 45x. Then I'm going to multiply by negative 7. Negative 7x times 2x, negative 7x. Negative 7x times 2x is negative 14x squared. Negative 7x times negative 3 is plus 21x. But we subtract the whole thing, so that makes, we are left with 24x. Bring down the 36. Multiply by 12, plus 12. And then we subtract the whole thing, and we are left with 0. Questions? Got to record. Okay, look at how they ask this question. 1 factor of 3x squared plus 8x minus 35 is x plus 5. Remember, 2 factors multiply to a product. They're giving us a product and a factor. They are implying what operation? Yes? Division. Okay? So they imply that 3x squared plus 8x minus 35 is the product. So that is our dividend. That goes in the box. Okay, why don't you try the next one? Pause the recording and try it again. All right, so now check your work. You should have 3x minus 7. Oops. Pause the recording if you want to look at our steps. All right, so this is basically the same thing. It's just going to be a little bit longer. I'd like to move on. Can I move on from this? Yeah. Okay. If you want, you can pause the recording and practice with this problem. All right, so the next one. We're going to do the same thing. 5x times what equals 5x to the third?
X squared.
X squared. Place it over the second term. Because I have two terms, I'm going to be multiplying that x squared by. We get 5x squared minus x squared. We're going to subtract the whole thing. Then we are left with, when we subtract, we distribute that negative, we're left with minus 15x. And bring down the x squared plus 23x. Now what am I multiplying by? Negative 3.
X.
Okay, so I'm going to multiply it by negative 3x. We get negative 15x squared and positive 3x. So now I am subtracting the whole thing. We end up clearing our 15x squared, and we end up with plus 20x. Bring down the 1. Is everybody good with that? I'm not drawing the negatives, but, you know, we're distributing here, and it becomes plus, and this becomes a negative. Right? Now, remember, let's say I'm doing this. 5 goes into 6. How many times? One time. I have 5. Subtract, I'm left with 1. 1 and 1/5. Remember how we do that? We take the remainder and put it over the divisor. We're going to do the same thing here when we cannot go anymore. Okay? So, 5x times 20x is times what equals 20x? 4 plus 4. And when I multiply 4 by 5x, I get 20x, and 4 times negative 1, I get negative 4. But if I subtract the whole thing, it means I'm going to end up with a positive 3. Now I can't go anymore, right? So I just take that 3 and I say plus the remainder. Plus 3 over 5x minus 1. And we have Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Let's continue. Yes?
Can I use the restroom?
Yeah. All right. Why don't you try the next one? Go. Pause the recording. Okay, let's check our work. So 2x goes into 2x to the third. X squared times. And we should get 2x cubed plus 6x squared with a remainder of 0. So I bring down the 10x. So now in this situation, 2x goes into that negative 10x how many times? Negative 5. Okay, now I get negative 5 times 2x is what? Negative 10x and minus 30. Subtract the whole thing, and we are left with 7 over 2x plus 6. Yes?
If the remainder can be simplified, well,
Oh, as in factored?
yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just leave it.
Okay.
You got enough to do. Right? Now, look at the way that, I guess, so the remainder would be 7, not 7 over 2x plus 6. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so now let's try another problem. That's not in my PowerPoint. We will start with. Okay, let's do, when you have something like x plus 1, right? or I don't even need the parentheses. X plus 1 divides into x to the 5th plus 1. Okay, I'm going to ask you to set this up like the following. Since I'm doing x plus 1 divides into x to the 5th, okay, I'm going to create a bunch of placeholders. So how many x to the 4th do we have? 0. We have 0 x to the 4th, right?
Yeah.
Plus 0 x to the 4th. How many x to the 3rds do we have?
0.
0 x to the 3rd. How many x squareds do we have? 0 x squareds. How many x's do we have?
1.
No, we don't have 1. We have none in that divisor, in that dividend. 0 x to the 1st. But then I have that plus 1. So do you see where the original equation is? So here's what we're going to do. X times what equals x to the 5th? So x to the 4th times x is x to the 5th plus x to the 4th. So I'm going to subtract the whole thing. This becomes negative, this becomes negative. These two cancel. I'm left with negative x to the 4th. Now, x times what equals negative x to the 4th?
Negative x cubed.
So negative x cubed times x, and I'm going to bring down the other one, plus 0 x to the 3rd, right? Negative x to the 3rd times x is negative x to the 4th minus, x cubed. Okay, I'm subtracting the whole thing. So now I am left with x cubed. Bring down the next one, which is plus x squared.
0.
0x squared, you're right. Okay, now, what are we multiplying x by to get x to the 3rd?
It's negative.
Did I lose a negative in there somewhere?
Yes.
Where?
You forgot to distribute the negative when you were Yeah.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Because I'm doing negative. You're right. No, but look, negative times 1 is positive, is negative. Then times that negative is a positive.
Yeah.
Okay? So now that's positive. I'm bringing this down. X times what is x squared times that, it's x to the 3rd. Now x squared times it's x squared, but I'm subtracting. That makes that negative. So these cancel, and now I'm left with negative x squared, right? Plus 0x. Now I'm multiplying by x. Negative x minus x, right? Minus x times x is
Negative x.
negative x squared. Negative x times 1 is negative x. But we have to subtract the whole darn thing. It makes it positive. So these two cancel out. I'm left with x plus 1. Almost done. I'm going to say plus 1. X plus 1. But we have to subtract. It makes that negative and that negative. We are finally left with 0. Okay, you ready to try one?
Yeah.
Shh. Okay, can I erase? Okay. All right, so the next one I'd like you to try is how about if I did x to the x plus 1 into x to the 5th minus 1. Instead of plus 1, it's minus 1. Try it. Remember, you're adding all the 0x's. 0x to the 4th to keep the placeholder. Pause the recording. All right, so now check your answer. You can either call that a plus negative, or you can then change the sign to a negative. And here is your answer. Okay, that's the lesson for today, dividing polynomials.